Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Chimera's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. Good morning, San Diego, or wherever you are and whatever time it is. I don't know why I decided with that intro, but I started with it. Blame Eddie. Anyways, if you haven't seen my episode yesterday, that ended up the day on Titania, Voice of Gaia. Make sure you check that one out at some point, but don't leave just yet because this new card has me saying, huh? And again, blame Eddie in the comments below. Thank you. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So, Phyrexian Fleshgorger is a brand new card with a brand new exciting mechanic that I think has a lot of potential, and I'd really like to see where they're going with it with other cards in this set. Regardless, let's just go over this card first. Then I will talk about that mechanic in depth and what kinds of decks might want to work with it. Regardless, Phyrexian Fleshgorger is a 7/5 Menace Lifelink artifact creature Phyrexian Worm that costs 7 mana. Or does it? Because, well, okay, before we get to that part, it also has Ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian Fleshgorger's power, which is very interesting because obviously it is a 7/5, so if you cast it for 7, sure. It's going to be Ward pay 7 life. That is a ton, but it's also a flexible, variable, essentially, amount of Ward because we have this other thing called Prototype on it. And Prototype, again, is a brand new mechanic. We'll talk about the details here, but let's just read what this says. You may cast a spell of different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its ability and types. And so we can actually cast it for 1 black, and then it is just a 3/3. That being said, instead of it being, a 7/5, it is a 3/3. It's going to cost us, 4 less mana overall. It is going to be, more, we have to have 2 black pips, obviously, to cast it, so it's going to be more restrictive of a casting cost, but obviously a lot cheaper to cast. A much smaller body, though. Still, though, it will have that Menace lifelink, and again, that Ward, pay life equal to its power, which, of course, then would be 3. Unless you've got any other pump effects, still, paying 3 life to target something, that is a good amount of life to pay. So essentially, Prototype makes cards more flexible, and Magic players out there love when cards are flexible. I mean, some, mechanics that people like out there, are like a kicker or a cleave. Those kinds of mechanics allow you to have some flexibility with cards, and this one's like, hey, here's a new kind of flexibility, and I'm really excited to see kind of what they do and how they lean into this in this set. Now, one other thing real quick before we jump into kind of the actual depth of this mechanic and how it all really works and kind of what all the details of it are. Yeah, so, I mean, although obviously this does appear to be, an artifact creature, that is colorless, that can, go into any kind of deck out there, essentially. Obviously, since it has those mana symbols on it, correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong on this, but yeah, since it does have 1 black for that prototype cost, if you were to try to put it into a deck that does not have black, yeah, that would not work. So yeah, it does, require a black color identity to work. But now that we've highlighted that, let's talk about the details of it at the, Magic article that came out with this. As you cast a Prototype card, you choose which set of characteristics you're using. If a Prototype card isn't on the battlefield with its Prototype characteristics or on the stack after being cast with those characteristics, it'll still have its normal set of characteristics. This means if Phyrexian Fleshgorger is in your library, graveyard, hand, or exile, it's a 7/5 colorless artifact creature with mana cost 7 and a corresponding mana value of 7. However, if you cast a Prototype spell using the Prototype ability, it keeps those characteristics until it leaves the battlefield. So with this one specifically, if you cast this, as a 3/3, it is going to be black, not colorless. Its mana value is going to be 3, not 7. And if you say clone it or copy it, you are getting a clone or copy of the Prototype version, again, that 3/3 black creature. So all very interesting things, and again, I think this is a kind of mechanic that I think they can really do a lot with and really play within this set, so I'm hoping to see a lot more of it. And there are definitely certain commanders out there and certain types of decks out there that are really going to want to utilize these kinds of cards. Yeah, Wizards has really been experimenting with these kinds of, flexible cards, different, MDFCs or, with Adventure or that kind of stuff. So yeah, we have seen them kind of utilize these mechanics, and Magic players seem to enjoy them. And yeah, it just does add kind of more variety and more flexibility, and you can kind of change up your game plan based on how things are going. Again, early on in the game, if you need to just get a body down, this isn't a bad, 3/3 for 3 with Menace and Lifelink, and, it's hard to actually deal with that ward. But of course, later in the game, cool, let's just get a big, scary Phyrexian Worm into play. So yeah, flexibility is never a bad thing, and yeah. Now let's move on and talk about some commanders and some types of decks that might want to consider a card like this. And again, this is just the first prototype card that we have seen from this set, and I'm really hoping we see quite a bit more. So the first commander that actually came to my mind when I saw this card in this new mechanic was Hirutsuku, Devouring Chaos. This is a commander that very much cares about mana value, and again, wherever, the Phyrexian Worm is, as long as it's not, in play as a prototype, it has the characteristics of the actual card, so again, its mana value is 7. Nevertheless, Hirutsuku is a 4/4 Ogre Demon that has pay a black, sacrifice a creature, scry 2. And by paying 2 in red, you can tap and exile the top card of your library. You may play that card at this turn. When you exile a non-land card this way, Hirutsuku, Devouring Chaos, deals damage equal to the exile card's mana value to any target. So a flexible card with a high mana value that you can utilize early if you need to, like Phyrexian Fleshgorger, can definitely slot right into a deck like this. Early on in the game, again, if you just need a body in play, cool. Get your worm out there, start swinging away, gaining some life. Yeah, you can probably get through on at least one opponent with that Menace too. And then when you need to, yeah, you can sacrifice that to scry 2 to help set yourself up for that second ability. Or again, if you've already set yourself up for that ability, or of course, there are ways to get, maybe a creature out of your graveyard to get on top of your library, and that worm is on top of your library, yeah, utilize that to just dish out 7 damage to any target. And rules layers out there, it does say exile the top card of your library, may play that card this turn. I believe you could play it either, for the actual mana value, or you could play it as a prototype. So, yeah, you should be able to utilize the Phyrexian Fleshgorger in either way. But yeah, commanders and decks like this one that, might care about mana value of certain kinds of cards, really do like flexible cards like, our new Phyrexian Worm. In the prototype mechanic is definitely something that Hirutsuku is going to want to consider. Next up, we can definitely get tricky with blink decks with this new card as well. For example, Amino, the Fate Shifter, is a legendary planeswalker that can be your commander that costs white, blue, black, and has a starting loyalty of 3. The +1 is nice. Draw a card, then put a card from your hand on top of your library. The -1, though, is what we want to focus on. Exile another target permanent you own, then return to the battlefield under your control. So this commander can definitely do some very tricky things, and prototype cards can definitely be tricky with this commander as well. And I should say, other blink commanders that, utilize black in their mana value. But yeah, again, when it's on the field, we cast it for its prototype cost, essentially. It is that prototype. It is a 3/3 with Menace and Lifelink. And yeah, that's nice. But if we blink it, it leaves, and then it's going to come back. And since it's coming back as a new card, essentially, or it's considered a new card, yeah, it is going to be then that 7 mana, 7/5 Menace Lifelink, ward essentially 7 life. So that kind of is a way to essentially cheat on the mana cost of the card. You basically are just like, all right, yeah, I pay 3 mana for this 3/3, and then you're like, okay, I blink it. Now it's a 7/5. I just basically saved 4 mana. And of course, the potential for this kind of interaction for blink decks can definitely be seen in future cards, I'm sure. This is pretty great, though. Being able to just, turn a 3/3 into a 7/7. But yeah, there are definitely going to be some opportunities to utilize prototype cards, and I'm excited to see future ones to see really how, a commander like Amino can use and abuse them. And I realize now I just said 7/7 instead of 7/5. It's early! Anyways, Blame Eddie, let's move on. In a somewhat similar way, next up let's talk about a commander like Michaelis the Unhallowed, a 5/5 zombie cleric that is Intimidate and says, whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. Yeah, I kind of always forget about that part, but yeah, be careful human decks against this one. Anyways, other non-human creatures you control get ++1 and have Undying. Which of course means that when a creature with Undying dies but had no +1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its control with a +1 counter on it. So again, in somewhat kind of like a blink way, this is, hey, okay, my card left the field, now it came back. And of course, again, your Phyrexian Worm is not a human, so it does have Undying with this commander in play, and it's going to come back essentially again, and it's going to be considered as a different card. So you get it down as a prototype early, and then yeah, it's in play. It dies, it comes back into play with a +1 counter on it, and again, it is that 7 mana, 7/5 version, which is now obviously, an 8/5 with that extra counter on it. So even more deadly. In a similar way to Blink, again, you can avoid paying that higher mana value and still get the value out of that higher mana side of the card. Not really side, but part of the card. I don't know how we're going to talk about these prototypes like this, but yeah, the non-prototype part of the card, the regular card. Now I'm just blabbering on. Anyways, Blame Eddie. So again, those kind of feigned death type of effects, or, you know, giving it Undying, giving it Persist, those kind of effects that can get your creature right back when it dies can definitely be considered, or, you know, decks that utilize those heavily can definitely consider these prototype type of cards, again, when you are saving on mana essentially out of that, but still getting the bigger version benefit when it does come back, and even bigger so when you've got Undying. Anyways, moving on, another commander that came to mind is actually Yannick Cryptic Sovereign, a 3/5 Sphinx with Flying, Vigilance, and Menace. A lot of things right there. On top of that, though, whenever it attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If its card's converted mana cost is odd, you may cast without paying its mana cost, otherwise draw a card. So Yannick loves odd mana values, and guess what? This new Phyrexian Worm has an odd mana value, clearly. So yeah, I mean, if we have it in our hand early in the game, it's not going to be a dead card for us, because again, we can just pay 3 mana for that 3/3 version, versus if it was just a 7 mana card, it would just be sticking around there, and we wouldn't really have anything to do with it. Now, obviously, in a deck like Yannick, you've got, you know, ways to brainstorm and get it on top of your library, but still, having that extra flexibility is very nice for a commander like this that does like to have those, you know, high-end, giant, heavy hitters that have an odd converted mana cost. But again, with that flexibility, like the Phyrexian Fleshgorger, where if it's in your hand, you can utilize it, but if you happen to hit off the top, yeah, you get that bigger version. So it's going to be really exciting, you know, for Yannick decks out there, or again, other kinds of decks that might be, you know, somewhat similar to this one. So it's a very unique commander, but again, ones that like that high mana value or a certain type of mana value and can really utilize that in a certain way. But again, a lot of those commanders, kind of like Hirutsuku, you don't want to get stuck with a giant card in your hand if you can't do anything with it. So having that added flexibility can really help. Speaking of which, one of the most popular commanders of all time, I mean, I think Yuriko was in the top 5 or so last time I checked. Anyways, a 1/3 human ninja with Commander Ninjutsu, which is just basically unfair. Not unfair, but yeah, saving on mana value for your commander, just getting around commander attacks is yeah, unfair-ish. Anyways, whenever a ninja you control deals counter to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life for that card's converted mana cost. So Phyrexian Fleshgorger can really help out a Yuriko deck in multiple ways. Again, having that on top of your library, kind of again like that Yannick or that Hirutsuku, is great, obviously, because hey, when your ninja deals damage to an opponent, yeah, you're going to reveal that and be like, all right, everyone loses 7 life, you know, just for one of my ninjas hitting you. That is a ton. But again, it's not a dead card in your hand either, because again, you don't have to pay that 7 mana. That flexibility is actually really incredible with this kind of a commander, because again, that is a creature that is somewhat evasive, again, with that Menace. Lifelink is nice too, but yeah, with that Menace, it can get through and help out with your ninjutsu for your ninjas as well. And I guess I should have probably rebbed the ninjutsu for those of you that aren't familiar with it, but yeah, return unblocked attacker to your hand, put on the battlefield from your hand, or guess with Yuriko, the command zone, tapped and attacking. Basically, you've already gotten that creature through, so now, yeah, your ninja's gonna get through and hit, and then, yeah, reveal the top card. So yeah, obviously, you know, a flexible card like this prototype can be very impactful, and yeah, really never a dead card in your deck. Again, having that added flexibility, I think, allows you to just do more things with individual cards. So yeah, I'm sure Yuriko decks out there are definitely going to be on the lookout for these kinds of prototype cards, especially, again, ones that have, you know, a high disparity between, you know, the actual prototype cost. Again, you can cast it for, you know, relatively cheaply. Again, if you got a prototype cost of 1 and it's an evasive creature, Yuriko is going to absolutely love that, especially if it's got, you know, a high mana value on the end. Moving on, though, how about a Reanimator type strategy, though, like Sephorus of the Hidden Ways, a 2/3 human wizard that says, whenever 1 or more creature cards are put in your grave from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This ability triggers only once each turn. So yeah, getting more and more bodies onto the field early can definitely be a good thing. And again, that flexibility with a prototype card can allow you to do that. It's not just a dead card in your hand at 7 mana. But of course, on top of that, Sephorus has create undead. Whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So yeah, with this commander, you can sneak out some large creatures from your graveyard. And again, when you are sneaking out the Phyrexian Fleshgorger from your graveyard, it is going to be that 7/5 version. You're not sneaking out the prototype version. So this is the type of creature, again, that you can get down early and often, and you can just say, all right, yeah, I can just, go through, swing out some opponents, gain some life. Eventually, it's probably going to die, and that's actually, again, not a bad thing. We get that trigger, we venture in the dungeon, and then, yeah, we can get the bigger version back. So I definitely can see some Sephorus decks out there being on the lookout for even more of these prototype versions, and yeah, just being excited to see kind of, again, like I mentioned with Hirutsuku, that disparity between, a low converted mana cost that you can just pay early, and then just the higher benefit that you can get later without actually having to even pay that higher mana cost. In a somewhat similar way, let's quickly talk about one of the commanders that has the weirdest names out there, Old Stickfingers. A star for X black-green. When you cast a spell, reveal cards to the top of your library to reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way in your graveyard, then put the rest above your library in a random order. And its power and top does equal the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So yeah, again, you can put a good amount of mana into that X. You can mill quite a bit, and you are actually going to be milling and getting, the big Phyrexian Fleshgorger into your graveyard, which again, in a Reanimator deck like this one, can allow you to then just utilize it, again, as that 7/5 version, instead of actually having to cast it for that 7 mana. But again, flexibility is just a word I've probably said like 80 times in this episode, but yeah, flexibility can be huge, because, yeah, you're not stuck with that bigger version in your hand. If you're not able to actually, play that bigger version, you can get it down early, just again, as a blocker, or again, as a way to just gain life and swing out at your opponents. You aren't stuck with it, but you still can have that higher end value out of the card just by, again, playing it as a 3 mana version. Maybe it dies at some point, it goes to your graveyard, it makes Old Stickfingers bigger, and you can just reanimate it back out with an ability or with a spell, and yeah, again, get that bigger benefit version, that 7/5, the much bigger heavy hitter. But now this episode is coming to a close. It's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Phyrexian Fleshgorger and the prototype mechanic. Yeah, I really like the design of this mechanic, and again, it just kind of all goes back to flexibility. I mean, probably, flexibility originally seen on, like, kicker cards or whatnot, but just, kind of new, like, adventure, that new kind of, like, cleave, and just, like, this other type of mechanic that allows you to utilize a card in various ways depending on the situation that you're in. Again, early on in the game, you can get this out as that 3/3 version. Later on in the game, you can get the much bigger version out, and of course, there are ways to use and abuse that. Again, blinking it, feign deathing it, or whatever we call that, essentially, bringing it back from the dead, right away, or, reanimating it. We can, get it out again as that 3/3 version easily, and then get the benefit of that bigger version by not having to actually pay that bigger version cost still. So yeah, I am very excited to see what they do with this kind of mechanic. I think there's a lot of potential with it. I mean, just think if there, again, is, a 1 mana version, of a prototype card that has a very high, converted mana cost. Again, simply blinking it can be a massive turn. And I'm sure, Wizards took that into mind, when they're actually designing these cards. Because they're obviously aware of the ways that you can use and abuse them. But yeah, I think this mechanic has a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see what else is in store. And of course, to see what else is in store, well, stay tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes and spoilers coming up. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.